In the prophecies, the point I'm trying to highlight is that over and over again in the prophets, we find God promising that in this experience, this new covenant experience that God is going to make happen with his people Israel, part of the product of that new covenant experience, part of the result of God filling them with the Spirit, is that they will walk into his laws, that they will keep them corporately, something they haven't really been able to do as a corporate people. There have been pockets of obedience throughout the Old Testament, but by and large, idolatry plagued the people of Israel, and you can just go back and read Israel's history to see that. But God's promising one day that his new covenant, right, Jeremiah 31:31, his new covenant is going to cause Israel as a corporate people to walk into his ways, to keep Torah, right? And that's why we read in Isaiah chapter 2, verse 4, that one day when the Messianic kingdom is established here on earth for 1,000 years with Jesus ruling from that kingdom, that the Torah, the law, is going to actually go forth from Jerusalem and the word of the Lord, right? The law of God is going to go forth from Zion and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. And therefore, the Torah is going to be the established constitution once again of Israel, and it'll be the worldwide standard that people will be able to witness. So that's why I said we have this theological incongruity that's created by the interpretation of standard Christian authors. So I'm not trying to slam Christian authors. I'm simply trying to say that Christianity has been working with a bias that assumes that the law of Moses has been done away with in Christ. And this is based a lot on maybe verses that you read in Paul, right? You know, Romans chapter 6, we're no longer under law, we're under grace. Jesus saying, I've not come to do away with the law, but to fulfill it, Matthew chapter 5. Galatians chapter 2, we're not justified by the works of the law, but by faith in Christ, in Jesus Christ, things like that. And all of these verses, especially some of the ones that show up in the book of Hebrews, and saying old, and saying anew, he brought the old is ready to vanish away. In Colossians, talk about types and shadows, and now the type is here, the shadow. What do we say? Why do we want to go back to shadows is what Christians often tell me, now that Jesus is here. So we've got this whole kind of theology built up around this assumption that Jesus brought the end of the law and that Paul kind of nailed the point home in his own letters. Let's read Tim Hegg to see what a different way of going about this. Here's what Tim says, quote, "This perspective that Yeshua is doing away with the old because it is incompatible with the new simply does not obtain if one reads the parables carefully," right? Listen to this. In our current text, the reason one does not put a new patch on an old garment is because it will fail to repair the old garment, but will make the tear even worse. So he's working from the common sense first, all right? Common sense. If we don't understand the common sense, we won't be able to make any allegorical application from there. Remember, the allegorical application is Christianity's invention. Christianity is the one that came along with the idea that what Yeshua, or what Jesus must be talking about, is an incompatible between the old system and the new system, and incompatible between the existing way of approaching God and blah, blah, blah. All right, that was, remember, Jesus doesn't give us the interpretation of his parable. He just lays it out there and then keeps moving. Tim Hegg continues. In other words, the purpose is to preserve the old garment. Now, let me pause and let that sink in for a moment. If you go back, I'm going to pull up the parable for us once again. If you look at the parable, in verse 16, Jesus says, "No one puts a piece of unshrunk cloth on an old garment, for the patch tears away from the garment and a worse tear is made." So he gives this common sense example from everyday life, patching clothing. But what's underneath the example is the assumption that you want to keep the garment in the first place. Otherwise, why would you go to the trouble of trying to patch it? If you didn't want to keep the garment, you would simply toss it or give it away or hand it down to one of your siblings, right? And then go out and get a new garment. Why try to patch an old garment if you don't want to keep the old garment? Understand? All right, so that's what Tim's getting at in the first section here. He continues. Even in Luke's somewhat different telling of the parable that we have in front of us, both garments are deemed as worthy. For the point is made that the new patch will not match the old garment. Again, common sense, you want to patch a garment that you want to keep. If indeed, this is my own words, if indeed, according to the allegory that Christianity has supplied for us, if indeed the old garment is representative of Judaism, the law of Moses, the people of God, the Old Covenant, the Old Testament, etc., and the new, whatever, the new patch, the new system, the new garment, I don't know, they don't really explain their parables very well. When I read through Christian commentaries, it doesn't always match piece per piece, which is fine. I understand that. Parables don't always match element for element as well. Parables are kind of generalized anyway, so that's fine. But if the old is Judaism, if the old garment is Judaism, then why in the parables is Yeshua trying to preserve the old garment? All right, makes sense?